Good morning. I hope you guys are enjoying the lovely weather outside, wherever you are. We will be starting in about a minute or so. All right, guys, so let's get started. First of all, let me thank you all for attending this webinar. Really appreciate that, wherever you are located in the region or outside. Welcome to this webinar. So this webinar is about 30 tips and tricks in 60 minutes. Well, to be honest, I've got more than 30 tips and tricks. So let's see if we can go over all of them. I hope everybody is able to hear me properly. If not, please mention that in the chat window. We've got some moderators who will be able to help you out. But I have just got some feedback that everybody is able to hear me properly. Cool. So let's get started. I'll start with my introduction. My name is Deepak Mani. I am the National Technical Manager at CAD Group. Been in the industry for almost 20 years now. I'm also really blessed that I get to travel around the world and do talks at various conferences. I've won a few awards as well. I've written a few books as well. So this first one up the top is Bluebeam Revu 2019 book that got released earlier this year. And then these are a couple of Navisworks books that I released recently. CAD Group, who we are. So at CAD Group, we are a customer-centric company with over 30 years of history and tradition dedicated to customer success. What do? We actually deliver innovative technology solutions to the design-focused industry professionals like you. We believe in delivering the design and technology solution with a sense of trust, friendliness, and value. Trust is really important for us, and that's why we've got customers who've been with us for almost 30 years. So I've got a couple of questions. Daniel has mentioned no sound. Daniel, can you please check your speakers, because I've got feedback that others can hear me properly. Roberto has mentioned I cannot hear anything. Roberto, can you please check your speaker as well? Thank you. All right. So coming back to CAD Group, we are a Bluebeam Platinum partner. So Platinum is the top tier status given to the partners around the world by Bluebeam based on the quality of service and also how we support our customers. We are also, we work with a number of other vendors, including Autodesk and HP and Microsoft. So we are pretty much at CAD Group, your one-stop shop for all your software, hardware, virtual reality, augmented reality needs. At this stage, I also want to mention a really cool initiative that CAD Group started last year, where for every software license that is renewed through our company, we plant a tree. Our marketing manager came up with this initiative, and we have planted quite a few trees, mainly in WA region. Fadi, if you could help Roberto. Roberto still can't hear anything. Looks like his audio isn't working. Maybe he needs to check his sound. Maybe his speaker is turned off or something. So Fadi, if you could please help Roberto. Thank you. Okay, before I start with the presentation or the webinar, I've got a few polls to go through. I'm going to launch my first poll. I'll give you guys 30 seconds to answer. So you should see that on your screen now. So we've got actually majority of people who've used Revu for less than 2 years. So that's actually pretty interesting. I'm going to close the poll now. So what I can see is 63% of people actually have used Revu for less than 2 years. For people who've used Revu for more than 2 years, I hope you find some of these tips and tricks that I'm going to show you interesting. The next poll coming up on your screen, I'm going to launch it now. It'll be open for about 15 seconds. All right, so I'm going to close this poll. And again, it's pretty interesting because there's about 72% of the people who are saying that they haven't used Bluebeam Revu or Bluebeam Studio sessions. Last poll on your screen now. All right, so this is interesting. I'm going to close the poll now. So an astonishing 90% of the people have actually not used Bluebeam Studio projects. And that's actually not a surprise, to be honest, because quite a few of you have got experience with Bluebeam Studio sessions, but not projects. And that's why I thought I'm going to start this tips and tricks sessions with my first trick and tip on Bluebeam Studio project. So let's get started. Studio Project. So Studio Project actually is a lightweight document management system that comes with all versions of Bluebeam Revu. With this COVID situation, a lot of us are working remotely from our homes, and especially the smaller organizations are having this little difficulty how to access the data from different locations. So what Bluebeam Studio projects do is they are your lightweight document management system with the checkout check-in functionality. You can have any kind of file. So please note that you can have any kind of file, like your Revit files, your AutoCAD files, your Navisworks files sitting on Bluebeam Studio projects. You could create folders and so on. And on a need-by-need basis, you can check out a file to work on it. If it's a PDF file that you check out, you can open it in Revu, you can work on it, and then you can check it back in, and it saves the version of that file. If it's a non-PDF file, when you check it out and open it, it opens it in the native program. Like it could be Revit, it could be Navisworks, it could be AutoCAD, or for that matter, it could be Excel or whatever it is. Once you have worked on that file, you save it and you can check it back in, and it saves the version history. So let me show you Studio projects. I'm now in my review session. On my Bluebeam Studio panel here, I'm currently in the Studio projects area. And these are all the different projects that I've got currently running. I'm right now in this project called Studio Training. And as you could see, I've got all these different files and folders. I've got some files sitting on the top level. I've got some files sitting inside these folders as well. I've also got some Navisworks files sitting here. So as I mentioned, the whole idea is it's my lightweight document. If I need to work on any of these files, all I need to do is right click on that file and I can go and say check out. Once I check out this file, it's like I have borrowed this file and now I'm ready to work on it. So once the file is checked out, it would show me this little symbol here that this file is checked out, and it'll also show me this in the pending area. Once I check out this file, anybody else who's got access to the project will not be able to check this file out. They'll get a message that this file has been checked out by such and such user. Once I've checked out this file, I can now right click and say open. As I said, if it's a PDF file, it would let me open it in Revu environment. And I can now go through this file make whatever changes I want. I can do markups and so on. So for example, I want to add a quick markup here. And once I've done this, I can now save this file. And when I close this PDF file, it's now asking me to check this file back in. And when I'm checking this file back in, I can add some notes. Or whatever that page was. And I can check this in. So basically what this is doing is it is now saving the original version and now bumping this with version 2, which means I've got multiple versions of this file. And if need be, I can change the versions as well. Right-clicking on this file shows me the checkout review or the revision history. So if I need to look at the revision history, as you could see here, it keeps this history. At any point of time, I can go into a previous revision and I can restore that revision. So a really cool way of keeping your file history. If I'm working with a non-PDF file, so for example, this Excel file here, I can say check it out. Once this file is checked out, I can then open this. And it opens it in the native program if it is installed on my machine. So if you open, for example, a Navisworks file or a Revit file, if it is sitting on your, if the program is installed on your machine, you can open it in that. So I'm going to change this symbol to this. I'll save this file, close, and then when I go back into review, I'll right click and say check it in. Because it's a non-PDF file, on close, it did not ask me to check it in. Now I'm going to check it in, and again, I've got this option here where I can add some comments. So in this case, we change the wall close out symbol, check in. And just like the PDF file that I showed you earlier, it keeps a history of this, which means at any point of time, I can right click on it. I can look at the revision history. It shows me all the different revision histories. I can go and make any of these previous versions current. So a really nice, lightweight document management system where you can upload any kind of file. As I said, if it is a PDF file, when you're working on it, you check it out. It opens it in review. If it is a non-PDF file, it'll open it in your native program if it's installed on your machine. So that's Studio Projects. Studio Sessions is a different concept. Studio Session is where we can have a PDF file sitting on a cloud-based location, and we can invite multiple users to mark it up at the same time. We did a webinar in detail about Studio Sessions and projects. Please let us know if you want a link to that. We are more than happy to send you the link. The second tip, which is one of my favorites, is keyboard shortcuts. So most of us are in this habit of using keyboard shortcuts. In Review, we can actually print our keyboard shortcuts and we can stick them to the workstation. Alternatively, if you want, you can also customize your keyboard shortcuts. So I'm gonna, to customize the keyboard shortcuts, if I click on this Review option on the menu around the top left, I've got this option called Keyboard Shortcuts. When I click on it, it'll display the Keyboard Shortcuts dialog box where I can now modify the keyboard shortcuts here if need be. And if there's a tool that doesn't have a keyboard shortcut assigned, I can click on this and I can assign a keyboard shortcut. The important thing is that if you are trying to assign a keyboard shortcut that already has been assigned, it would give you the error message that the keyboard shortcut has already been assigned to something else. So try assigning another keyboard shortcut. So again, a really cool way of creating keyboard shortcuts, assigning them to the tools. And most importantly, you can also export these. You can import them in on the other machines and so on. And if need be, you can print them as well. Reopen files from the previous version of Review. This is hands down one of my favorite features of Bluebeam Revu. So let's say I'm working on Bluebeam Revu. I've got some files open currently. In this file, I'm actually zoomed into this location here. I also have another file opened. And in this file, I'm actually zoomed into this location. Now, I need to go to a meeting. And in our case, we use what we call as open licenses, means they are like cloud-based network licenses. So because I'm going to spend 2 hours in the meeting, I don't want to hold on to this license. So I'm going to close Bluebeam Revu. Now, once I have closed Bluebeam Revu, I can go into the meeting. When I come back from the meeting, I want to fire up Revu. But most importantly, I want to open all the files that I had opened in my session when I closed it. Also, because I was working on a PDF file which had multiple sheets, I don't want to remember which sheet I was working on, where was I when I was working on that. So in this case, I can click on this file access option on the top left, and I can click on this option here called reopen files from last session. So please note that I'm in the file access panel, and in the file access menu, when I click on reopen files from last session, it opens these 3 files from the last session. And not only that, it takes me to the exact location where I was when I went to the meeting. How cool is that? So I said, this is hands down one of my favorite features of Bluebeam Revu. The next one is setting the preferences for auto sizing the text box. How many times it has happened to us where we are adding markups or text and so on? By the way, I'm a big fan of using shortcut keys, and that's why I showed you shortcut keys as one of my first tips. That's because I don't like burning my calories in going all the way up to the tools menu and then markup and then click on text box. See how many calories I had to burn? I don't like that. So I'm going to press the T key on the keyboard. And Bluebeam Revu is one of the most user-friendly packages. I always tell this in my presentations. That's because in Bluebeam Revu, whenever you invoke a command, on the bottom left corner, Revu tells you what exactly are you supposed to do. And this is displayed on the status bar. If the status bar is not turned on, you can press the F8 key. It's a toggle to turn on and off status bars. In this case, it's asking me to select a region to place the text box. I'm going to drag 2 opposite corners here, and I'll say, if I could spell it right, location of. And when I click somewhere outside, notice that this text box is a lot bigger than the actual text. Now, one of the ways to fix it is if I right click on it, I can go and say auto size text box. Alt Z is the shortcut key. Now, I don't want to be doing this every time I write a text box markup or a Cloud Plus markup or a callout markup. So in Bluebeam Revu, I can go into the preferences. So Revu on the top left, I can go into preferences, and on the tools area here under markup tab, I've got this checkbox here that says auto size text box and callout markups. If this checkbox is turned on, I can now go and add a new text box, irrespective of how big the text box is. As soon as I finish writing the text and I click somewhere outside, it automatically sizes the text box. And that's pretty much same with the callout markups and also with the Cloud Plus markups. Saves us a lot of time. Fadi, there's under Nicholas Cheng, he's having problems with the audio, so if you could please take care of him. So Nicholas, yeah, obviously you can't hear me, but looks like there's some problem at your end. Your speaker seems to have an issue. All right, so the next one, hold the shift key to create straight line, square, or circle markups. This is something that quite a few programs have. So for example, if I go into drawing a line or a polyline, right now I can draw lines at any angles, but if I hold down the shift key, it actually lets me snap onto the 45-degree angles. Same thing with the polyline markups, etc. as well. And if you're creating ellipse, so if I go into markup and invoke the ellipse tool, holding down the shift key would let me create a circle markup by defining 2 corner points. Now, I'm not a big fan of this. There are other tools that I use or other ways I use to create these circles, and I'm going to talk about those in a few minutes in other tips. Pressing Alt key to draw 3-point circular arc or center point circle. So this is what I actually use. So what I mean by that is, if I go into the arc markup, for example, By default, the arcs are drawn by specifying two endpoints of the arc. But in this case, you don't know whether it's a proper circular arc or it's an elliptical arc and so on. I don't want that. So what I could do is when I go into the arc markup, if I hold down the Alt key before I pick my first point, so I'm holding down the Alt key now, I'll click as the first point here, click as this as a second point, which actually is the second point of the arc. And now I can pick the third point of the arc. So what it's doing is it's actually creating a proper circular arc. All I had to do was, before I picked my first point, I had to hold down the Alt key. So holding down the Alt key lets you create a 3-point circular arc. And same thing with the ellipse markup as well. With the ellipse markup, if I hold down the Alt key before I pick my first point, it now lets me create a center point circle. How cool is that? So that's a center point circle. Again, the arc markup and the ellipse markup can be used to create circular arcs or a center point circle. All you have to do is hold down the Alt key before you pick your first point. Format Painter. I cannot tell you how many times I get this this request from people. So let's say if I go and open one of these files here. So I've already added some markups to this file where I've got some rectangle markups created. I've got some polygon markups created. Now what I want to do is, if these are my own markups, I obviously would have saved them in my own custom tools. But if it's not one of my markups, I don't have it saved, which means that I don't have it on my custom tool set. So what I want to do is I want to create a new, for example, rectangle markup. But this rectangle markup needs to have the same properties as this one here. So if I right click on this existing markup here, I've got this option called Format Painter. I can now apply these properties to this particular markup here. Similarly, if I go and create a polygon, I'll right click on this and I'll go and say Format Painter, pick this one here, and it applies those properties. Now, please note that the properties that are applied, for example, in this case, the hatch pattern wasn't applied. It could come down to custom hash patterns that were created that you do not have access to. So just be a bit mindful of that, please. Similarly, if I right click on this markup here, if I say Format Painter, pick this one, it goes and applies those properties to this markup here. Doesn't apply the fill pattern. And again, it comes down to if it is a custom settings that you've got somewhere. But Format Painter, one of my favorite tools. Selected markups to all PDF pages. So let's say we are working on a document, which could be a document like this. And I want to add a markup, not a stamp, just a markup. And the markup could be about something. Let's say we need to add a markup here. And I want to go and drag this here. Please remove. Now, I want this to be added to all the sheets, and I don't want to do it manually, but I know that all the sheets at the same location need this markup. So I could simply right click on this markup here, and I've got this option called Apply to All Pages. What this does is it now applies the same markup to all the pages at the exact same location. Now, obviously, if these are stamps, you could do this with stamps as well, but with stamps, you can also batch apply stamps, whereas with the markups, it's actually a pretty cool way. All I'll do is I'll go to this page here where it doesn't exist, and I'm going to delete this. Backspace to deselect previous points for polylines and polygon markups, and also measurements as well. Again, this is something that I get asked quite often. Let's say in my case, I'm creating a polygon. So if I go to the polygon tool, I'll go and pick one of the standard polygons. And I'm picking these points. Let me turn on the snapping, obviously. Snap to markups. And for my first point, I've picked this point. Second point, I'm supposed to pick this point, but by mistake, I've picked this point here. Now I can continue doing this and later on move the point. But instead of that, if I want to fix it right now, I can simply press the backspace key. Pressing the backspace key deselects this point that I selected. So backspace lets you deselect your previously selected points all the way to the start. And this works for the polyline markups, polygon markups, area measurement, volume measurement, polylength, perimeter measurements, and so on. So it not only works for markups, it also works for measurements. And again, if I show you this one more time, if that was the wrong point, I can simply press the backspace key, it deselects that point. How cool is that? Again, something that I get asked quite a lot, especially when people are taking off quantities and measurements and so on. Multiple leader lines to callouts. So let's say I want to add a new callout markup. I'm going to start with this here. I'm going to place it here. Please check the wall type. I want to make sure that it is a right line text. I'll also customize this. I haven't customized anything since morning. I'm going to do this. I'm going to change my fill opacity to 30%. And change this to close filled. And change the text to blue as well. Right, so I've got this callout markup here, but I want to also add the same text to another wall. So if I right click on this callout markup, I've got this option here called add leader. So this option lets me add multiple leader lines to the same markup. Please note that unfortunately this option is not available to add the leader on the other side, but on this side I can add as many leaders as I want. Aligning text. So what I'm going to do is add a few text markups. So let's add a text markup here. Text one, I'll copy this and paste it somewhere here. Paste it somewhere here. So what I want to do is I've added these texts and I can try my best to line them up properly. But instead of doing that, if I shift select all these texts, I can now right click on, let's say, this text here, and I've got these alignment options. I can align them left, center, right, align them top, middle, bottom, or whatever it is. I can also distribute them horizontally as well. So if I click on distribute them horizontally, it now fixes the spacing between them. I can also go and now say alignment and align middle. So all these texts are now aligned together using this as the reference text. So if you've got a PDF file where you're adding quite a few text markups or text box markups, aligning them together is a good idea, makes it look a lot better. Hyperlinks to images and snapshots on additional pages. Again, excuse me. Again, hands down, one of my favorite features of Bluebeam Revu. So let's say I got this PDF file and I need to talk about maybe some of these areas. Maybe I need to talk about this area here, but on this PDF file, that area is actually appearing really small. So what I can do is I can create a snapshot of this. Snapshot is going into the edit menu, snapshot. G is the shortcut key. It's like copy paste, but it's smart copy paste, means it actually maintains the vector integrity of your markups. So I'm going to go and say snapshot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, enter. It creates this snapshot. And now I can go and insert a new page. I'll click on insert blank pages. I'll go and insert a blank page. I want it to be an ISO A3 size page, landscape. So that's my second page inserted. I can now press Ctrl V to add this markup, and I can now make it bigger in size. As I said, the advantage of using the snapshot tool is it maintains the vector integrity. So if I select the snap to markup tool, when I'm creating things like lines and polygons and so on, I can still snap onto these elements. So this is where I can now add more details about this. The problem is when somebody gets this PDF file, chances are that they will not see here that there are 2 pages, or they may not be into the thumbnails panel, so they may not see that there are multiple pages. but I need people to go into page number 2 to look at more details of this. So this is where I can go and add a new markup here. Normally, I would add a text box or a Cloud Plus markup where I can go and say, click here to know more. Let's make it right aligned. And now I can create a hyperlink on top of this to take people to page number 2. So if I go to the tools menu, I can click on hyperlink. I'll drag a box around this here. And now it says, what do you want to do? I can hyperlink to a website. I can open a document. But in this case, I want it to go to page number 2, fit to page. Click OK and press escape to finish this command. Now, as soon as I hover the cursor over this, I can see the hyperlink. When I click on it, it takes me to this page here. How cool is that? Now, the best part is I can place a text here. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Let's make it 24 height. And I'll say, click here to go back. Now, when I create a hyperlink on this, I don't want to go to the extents of page number 1. I want to go to the actual region where I came from. So this is where I can use another really smart feature of hyperlinks called snapshot. So I'll say I want to create a, sorry, not snapshot, place. I want to create a place. It says, what place do you want to create? I'll say place is on page 1, washroom. And now I'm going to create a snapshot view by clicking on get rectangle, go back to my page number 1, create a region around this area here, and OK. So what this does is I click on this, it takes me to page number 2. And when I click on this text here, it takes me to that region instead of going to the extents of the page. Again, how cool is that? By the way, an additional tip here, when you're working on CAD format size files, meaning A3 and above, scrolling back and forth is zoom in, zoom out. And you can also double click the wheel mouse button to do zoom extents. So double clicking the wheel mouse button is zoom extents, just like CAD programs such as AutoCAD and Revit. So as I said, really cool way of creating hyperlinks and snapshots. The third one is opening IFC files as 3D PDF. This again is an amazing feature that not too many people know of. Please note that starting Revu 2019, this feature does not work with Revu Standard. It only works with Revu CAD and Revu Extreme versions, not with Revu Standard. Till 2018, it works with Revu Standard as well. So basically, let's say you've been sent an IFC file, you just want to open it, you want to view it, section it, and so on. And to do that, you can simply go to the file open command. So file open. And on the bottom right where it says PDF file, if I change this to 3D files, it now changes to 3D files and I can see an IFC file here. If I double click on this IFC file, it actually now comes up with this process where it is converting that IFC file into a 3D PDF. And now I can also add some default views to start with. So let's say I want to start with the perspective left top front and isometric view. I want it to be an ISO A3 size page. I want to start with the illustration render mode by default, and I want the background to be white. As soon as I click OK, it now creates a 3D PDF file and shows it on the screen. And because it's a 3D PDF file, I can actually spin it around. I can view it. I can also change my render modes, and I can change this to, for example, solid render. I can change this to solid outline and so on. And the best part is if I click on any of these elements here, on the properties panel, it gives me the information about that particular selected element as well. You can also create sections. You can also, if you've got your 3D panel turned on. So let me just go in here. I think it's gone into the mode of signing me in. So show 3D model tree. So with the 3D model tree displayed, I can also click on it and it shows me that element in the model tree. Similarly, it highlights the selected element from the model tree as well. So a really cool way to review and access IFC files. Fadi, I think somebody just said the phone call dropped out. Can you please check that? Okay, let's keep going. I don't want to save this file. Thank you. Disable line weights before measurements. So by default, when we are working with CAD format files, a lot of this stuff has got line weights added. Nicole, if you hold on to the questions, I will answer all the questions at the end, please. All right, so I've got this PDF file here. I need to actually start measuring it and add some markups and so on. But sometimes when you've got these thick lines, it's hard to pick the correct point that you want to pick. So what we could do is before you start performing measurements, you could actually go to the view menu and we've got this option called disable line weight. What this does is it now turns off the line weights of the elements and makes it a lot easier for us to pick those corner points when we are performing our measurements. So a really cool feature that I always use before I start measuring elements in my PDF files. So guys, if you, hold on to your questions. We'll answer the questions at the end of this session. We'll have about 10 minutes to take care of questions at the end. Create custom measurements. Again, this is something that we discussed in one of the webinars that I did earlier about quantity takeoff. Bluebeam Revu is really, really smart when it comes to taking off quantities. And the reason is because it actually lets you create these custom tool sets that you can use to take off measurements. So for example, in this case, I've got these different carpet types created to take off carpet measurements. I've got all these different tile types to take off these tile measurements. And once you have created those, you can add them to your custom tool set. The advantage of this custom tool set is you can also share it with your entire team. So everybody is using the same information to add these markups. A really cool way of standardizing your company standards. As I said earlier, we did a webinar in detail where we discussed on how to create these custom tool sets. So please let us know, and we are more than happy to send you the link of that where I discussed creating these custom tool sets in detail. Dynamic fill for complex regions. So let's say I've got this region to fill where I want to apply carpet 1 area type. That's where we've got this really smart tool called dynamic fill. J is the shortcut key for that. So if I press the J key, and by the way, I've already calibrated this sheet. Before you perform any measurement, you have to calibrate the sheet to get the measurements right, obviously. And again, something we discussed in detail in our other webinar. If I press the J key on the keyboard, it activates the dynamic fill tool. So dynamic fill is like bucket filling a closed region. The key here is closed region. If I want to include this area here to close as well, I need to create a new boundary, which I can do using this tool here called create boundary. Now, my problem is when I click on this create boundary tool, see the circle size is massive, which means that if I create a boundary, it is pretty massive boundary. I obviously don't want that. I've got this option here where I can actually reduce the boundary sizes. The problem with this is every time I invoke this dynamic fill tool, I have to manually reduce the boundaries. So this is again something that I get asked quite a lot. Is there a way to permanently reduce the boundary sizes and also the fill size? The answer is yes. If I go back into my review preferences, so under review preferences, under tools, when I click on measure option, I've got this option to control the size of fill and the size of boundary. If I go and change this to 25% and 25%, Please note that if I try to type in, let's say 1 or 2 or something, it doesn't work. Minimum is 25%. So I've changed the fill size to 25, boundary size to 25. Okay. Now when I invoke the dynamic fill tool, and if I want to create a boundary, as you could see, the circle size is really small. So I don't have to manually do it every time. I'm going to close the boundary here. And now I want to dynamically fill this region. And once I've filled this region, if I've got some custom measurement tools created like these carpet and tile types, I can pick them from this list. So let's say this needs to be carpet type 2, and I'll hit apply, and it applies this carpet type 2 measurements to this. It's showing me the value as 0. That's because I just need to reset the calibration. So if I go and change this to, for example, square feet and then back to square meter, it will work fine. But notice that this text of the measurement is overlapping with the content of the PDF. This is the other tip here where I can hold down the shift key and I can drag this information out. So holding down the shift key lets you drag this information. Going back in here, I'll go and add on the boundary from this to this. Enter. I'm going to create the dynamic fill in this region. And for this, I want to actually use carpet type 1. Apply, and that's the carpet type 1. And again, just need to reset this. And if I drag this out, there we go. And please note that I had to reset this. The reason is because I had these tool sets created earlier and the file calibrated earlier and so on. Otherwise, you don't need to reset anything. Creating area measurements on Revit spaces. I know a lot of you guys work with Revit. So when you're exporting the PDF file from Revit, you could actually export that with the spaces included. And then if you open that PDF file in Bluebeam Revu, it actually brings in those spaces with it. And you can then click on any of these spaces here and right click on it, and you can create area measurement from that. Currently, it is set to square millimeters because that's what it is set in my measurements here. I can go and modify this, and I can calibrate this sheet. I can go and modify the measurement scale, etc., etc. So again, a really cool way of quickly creating area measurements from the architectural spaces. Hold down the shift key to move the area measurement value, which is what I just showed you earlier, where we can hold down the shift key and move the measurement values. Showed in additional text with the area measurement. So if I go into this information here, and please note that this is sitting on the properties panel. So you got to make sure that you go to the properties panel. Let's in this case, if I go to the properties panel here, I can go and display additional information. So if I click on this edit option here, I can add the length information with all the segments. I can also add wall area, etc. So first I want to display the length. It's giving me these length of the segments combined. I can also go and define the wall area. Please note that for the wall area to actually work properly, I also need to define the depth of this wall. So let's say if I go and say that's, we want it to be in millimeters. So I want it to be 2400. And that's the wall area now. How cool is that? So again, please note that this information is sitting on the properties panel where you click on edit captions, you can control it here. If I go into my measurements panel, I've got that information available here as well. Dynamic fill preferences, which is what I showed you earlier. Instead of you manually changing it every time you invoke the dynamic fill tool, you can set the preferences. Showing the centroid of the area measurement as well. So if you need to, for some reason, show the centroid of this, you can simply click on the area measurement, and in the measurements panel, you can click on show centroid. So it gives you the centroid of that area measurement. Link area measurement to an Excel spreadsheet. So this only works for extreme version. Let's say I am working with this PDF file here. I now need to link this to the Excel spreadsheet. I can actually now create a live link. people who do not have extreme version, you can still export your measurements as an Excel summary. So it gives you a summary of all the measurements. But people who've got extreme version, you can create a live link with the Excel spreadsheet. So let's say this file is called metric takeoff, and I've got these different measurements here. I can create an Excel spreadsheet, which could be my bid template. I can import the quantities straight from Excel spreadsheet from my PDF file by right-clicking on it and creating a quantity link. Again, please note that this feature is only available in Revu Extreme. I'm going to click Create. It'll ask me to select the PDF file. It's actually checking whether I've got license or not. I'm going to go and say Add Files. It says which file do you want to bring it from. I'll go to the desktop where I've saved the data set, and I'll pick this file here. Okay, and now it says what measurement do you want to get here? I say I want to get the area measurement of subject equals carpet type 1 or carpet type 2 in this case. I'll go OK. It now gets me the sum of the values, which is basically carpet type 2 here, 23 square feet plus carpet type 2, wherever it was. Now, the best part is that this is a live link. Now, what I mean by that is if I go and create another carpet type 2 measurement, I don't even need to save this PDF file. When I go into my Excel spreadsheet, it automatically bumps this information here. And obviously, if I've created these formulas, it gives me the total value here as well. Now, again, people who do not have extreme version, there is a way where we can see the actual dollar value associated with our measurements right within Bluebeam Revu. I discussed that in detail in our quantity takeoff webinar. We can send you a link of that, but it's basically creating custom columns and linking them to our measurements. Similarly, if I want to get, let's say, tile type 1 measurement here, I'll go and say create. I want this to be the area of subject tile type 1. It gives me the value here. And in Revu, if I go and create a new tile type 1 measurement, I don't even need to save this. When I go into my spreadsheet, it updates this. How cool is that? We are running short of time. I might have time for a couple of other tips, and then we'll get into Q&A. So create a legend from your custom toolset. This is really cool. So let's say we have added all these different markups using our toolset here. I now need to get a table where I want to get the sum of all these values. So I can go into my custom toolset, click on this cogwheel on the top right, and say legend, create new legend. I can now place the legend here, and it shows me in a table a sum of all these values. The best part is you can also customize this, so I can add additional columns, especially if you've got the cost information with it. You can also go and change this to, let's say I want it to have a grid line, 0.5 or whatever it is, and you can add this also to your tool set. The best part is it is not a dumb table. So for example, carpet type 1, currently it is 33 square meters. If I go and add additional carpet type 1, it automatically bumps the values here. So it's a smart table, not just a dumb table. Again, a really cool feature that I love about Bluebeam Revu. Probably the last tip for this, reuse markup tools. So if there are quite a few markups that you want to add on a regular basis, you can select this option, you can select this button here that says reuse markups. What this means is that when you're adding, for example, a text box markup, once you have finished adding a text box markup, you can then keep going with it, and you can add additional text box markup. Oh. So it will keep continuing till the time you don't press escape. So if you press escape, that's when it finishes it. So basically reusing your markup tools. I do have a few more tips to show, but we are running out of time. But let's one last one here, which is hide all markups. If I go and open a PDF file, which is actually a really busy file, let's go and open. Yeah, this one here. So this is a pretty busy file. It's got a lot of different markups here. If for some reason I want to turn off the visibility of all the markups, I can go into my markups list, which is available down the bottom left. And I've got this option here called hide all markups. So it hides all the markups, goes back to the original PDF, just in case I want to do something with it. With markups list, we can also filter markups and so on. And again, this is a discussion for another day because I need to spend some time with Q&A. But I hope you enjoyed this tips and tricks session. It is also recorded, and if you want, we can send you a link to the recording. Let me get into Q&A because there are quite a few questions here. So no sound, no sound, no sound. There are a few people who have requested the links, which Fadi has already sent. So Nico sent a question, just a question about the 3D PDF. Can it be viewed in any PDF format viewer? Absolutely, Nico. So this is the best part. When you create the 3D PDF from Bluebeam Revu, it can actually be opened in any other PDF viewer like Acrobat viewer as well, till the time they've got options to accept the security permissions. So when you open a 3D PDF file, for example, in Acrobat, it comes up with the security option on the top right saying, this file has got some content that may be difficult for you to view. Do you want to accept it? You click on yes, and then you're happy days. So you can then view the 3D PDF file. Chris asked, how did you convert the 3D again? So Chris, what I did was I went into the file open command. So file open, I changed the files of type on the bottom right to IFC files. It now shows me the IFC files here, and I can open this IFC file. That's how we create a 3D PDF file from IFC. It can also create from View 3D. Now, if you've got a Revu CAD version or Revu Extreme version, you can also create 3D PDF directly from programs like Revit or Navisworks. But this is where somebody sends you an IFC file and you just want to open it. So Ahmed asked, is there any select similar on Bluebeam Revu? Yes, we do, but it's a bit different in Bluebeam Revu, Ahmed. So what we got to do is we got to go into our what we call as markups list. I can then, let me cancel this. I can then sort these markups by subject. So once I've sorted these markups by subject, I can now select all, for example, these markups here. Similarly, I can select all these markups here. So there's no like right click select similar like we've got in AutoCAD, but this is how we do it here. I hope I spelled the name right. So Misha asked, does that include custom toolset? I'm not sure what that question was related to, but if you're referring to the webinar that we did earlier that I was talking about, yes, we did talk about creating custom toolsets. Nicholas asked for the link, which Fadi has already sent. So Nicholas added, part of my role is estimating quantity takeoff of different types of walls, for example. To do this, I have to create a blank document with dummy layers. The idea would be that, so Nico, because it's a long question, maybe what we could do is we could take it offline. Please send us this in an email, and more than happy to take it offline. Yeah, some of you have asked for the link to the recording. We are more than happy to send them to you. How do we get access to the recording? Yep, we'll send the recording. So please, guys, if you want the access to the recording, just reply to the email that you would have received with the link to this. So that way we don't miss anyone. We want to make sure that everybody who requires a link is sent a link. So if you could please send us an email requesting the link, that would be fantastic. That way we will make sure that we don't miss anyone. Can I please get the link? Yep. All right. I'm having trouble with the dynamic fill stopping at the edge boundary. Yes. So Misha, that could be. So for example, let's say if I just hide this. If there are openings, for example, see how this wall has a little opening here. And if I'm creating a dynamic fill, so what would happen is this would leak out of this region here. This also happens when you're trying to click somewhere, for example, in this wall, and as soon as you click somewhere outside, it goes outside. So two things. First, you need to make sure that the region you are dynamically filling is a closed region. If it is not a closed region, you can use the boundary tool to close that region. I'm going to close it from here to here. Now, please note that the reason I was able to snap onto that point is because it's a vector PDF. If you're working with a raster PDF, which is like somebody opening a PDF file or printing a PDF file, or sorry, printing a document on a sheet of paper and scanning it as a PDF file, which is a raster PDF. So in that case, there are no boundaries that Revu can identify. In that case, you'll have to create boundaries from scratch. But if it is a vector PDF, make sure it is a closed region. And then when you create a dynamic fill, it won't leak out. So just be a bit mindful of that. Link to the webinar. Yes, Anthony will send the link to the webinar. Yeah. So Jesse, if you could please make sure that you send us an email, we will make sure that we send you the link. So again, anybody who needs the link to the webinar, just send us an email. We'll make sure that we don't miss anyone. Yes, Misha, yeah, we create the boundary using the boundary tool here in Dynamic Fill. So if I start from scratch again, let's say this is an open region here. I'll type in J and then click on this boundary tool. And again, as I showed you earlier in the webinar, by default, the boundary sizes are pretty huge. So you might want to go into Review Preferences. And under Tools Measure, reduce your boundary size to 25%. So it'll bring it down to the smallest possible value. And then using the boundary tool, you close the boundary. And now you will be able to dynamically fill the region without it leaking out. All right, guys, we are pretty much right on time. Again, thanks a lot for attending this webinar. Really appreciate that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. There were quite a few of you guys who've been using Revu for more than 2 years. I hope you found some of these tips and tricks handy. And please, just a reminder, anyone who needs access to the recording of the webinar, please send us an email. We want to make sure that we don't miss anyone. Thanks again for your time this morning / afternoon, depending on wherever you are. Really appreciate that. Keep safe and stay healthy. Cheers.